Good evening from Vietnam. Good morning to you, Professor Leidy. Thanks a lot for spending your morning to join our program and to share your story and wisdom to our audience. And on behalf of listeners around the world, we want to say thank you to you.
Oh, my pleasure. It's exciting to be here, and it'll be a fun conversation.
And so you haven't been to Vietnam. If you decide to travel to this part of the world, please let us know in advance. Now you have a new friend, new family. We would love to take your family around to show you our people, our culture, our food, and exciting things here. Okay.
Okay, yeah, that sounds good. I like banh mi,
You like
but
banh mi.
I need to get there.
Wow, where did you get your first banh mi?
I think North Carolina, but I think it was authentic. I read about it afterwards. So I mean, it's a combination, right, of French and Vietnamese. Yeah, so I like sandwiches. So
Absolutely, we have the best banh mi in the south of Vietnam where I live. So if you come
okay,
here, I'll show you a famous place here. Okay,
all right. Well,
and
now I have an excuse. Yeah.
and for a taste about culture, it's very honored if we can have you to share a little bit to our audience about who you are and the work you do. Would you please
Mhm.
do that for us?
Yeah, I mean, the fastest explanation, I'm a professor at the University of Virginia, which is in Charlottesville, about 2 hours south of Washington, D.C. Technically, I'm an engineering professor, but I do a lot of research in how people think and make decisions, specifically how we make decisions about kind of changing the world from how it is to how we want it to be. So that's my job. I write books. One of my books is called Subtract, The Untapped Science of Less. And then I've got a book coming out in April called In a Good Place, how the spaces where we live, work, and play can help us thrive. And so I do my research, I write books, I do things like this, and talking to people. I think I started doing it because that's what you're supposed to do when you have a book, is go out and talk about it. But I learned so much from these conversations, and it's really like priceless way for me to to keep growing. So so that's a little bit about me. Before I was a professor, I played professional soccer, and before I also worked in kind of construction management for a while before becoming a professor, and I'm also a dad and an assistant soccer coach now.
So soccer, for professional soccer, which team did you play?
Pittsburgh Riverhounds. So they're in the second division in the United States. But it was in the U.S. you play, like, especially back when I was playing college, you play through college and then you try to play professionally. And so I did that for a couple of years. And I mean, I was making enough money to support one person, but Lionel Messi, it was obvious that my career wasn't gonna be able to be a long-term proposition. But it was a fun experience. I got to see a lot of the country. Of course, soccer is a really every country and every culture has some relationship to soccer, it seems like, and so it's a really good way to kind of learn about the world, and it's been a good kind of lifelong passion, and I'm excited for the World Cup coming to the United States, and coaching my son, who's now 11 and really loves the sport. So
Wow, Professor Leidy. Soccer, when I came to the US in 2000 as an international student, I missed
okay,
soccer a lot, right?
where were you in the US?
I was in Seattle. That's why my children were, we sent our
Okay,
children to
okay.
Seattle. And I remember that one night I bought a lot of food. I invited my friends over. I bought beers and we ordered a football game, and
uh
from I think this network or something like that, a pay-per-view, right? And then all three of us are international students watching football, and this is not football. And
I'm sorry. Yeah.
and then since then we knew that American football is different than our soccer around the world, and soccer back then it was not really like famous in America, so you so you have a very beautiful journey that you introduced to us in less than 3 minutes, and that's not fair for our audience. And this conversation is to dive in deeper to know why soccer, why engineer, why people, behavioral science, how did you come up writing the book? So let's travel time with us, okay?
Okay.
Uh, so if you come to Vietnam with your family, I would love if we can go to my hometown as well. It's in the middle of the country called Da Nang City. So
Okay.
I
Yeah.
was born there in a very poor community, in a very poor family. And one night we had electricity. The next night we did not have electricity, so it's dark. And in
Mhm.
that darkness, right, I always wanted to become an astronaut so that I could fly to the moon and I can, enjoy the beautiful sky and brightly up there. But life has taken me to a very different direction, Professor Leidy. So for you, when you were little, what was your first dream about the work that Leidy is going to do when he's growing up? Yes.
Yeah, I mean, being a professional soccer player was definitely my first, okay, I'm thinking about the future. What am I going to do? And how would that be really fun? I mean, I probably thought about professional basketball and, any sport that I played. But then the more that I was playing soccer, then I was like, okay, this is something that I want to try to do. So that was really my driving motivation all the way through middle school and high school and college, basically between the ages of 10 and 20. That was what I was focused on. And I knew that education was important, and my parents were making sure that I was still learning. I mean, I did my engineering degree while playing soccer in college, so it wasn't like I was to the side, but that was definitely my first career goal. And as you said, like, I mean, soccer in the US, I mean, I had that goal before there was a professional league in the United States. So it was a stupid goal. But then, the World Cup came in 1994, and then a professional league came. And then, so by the time I got old enough, there was that opportunity.
Was there anyone in your family, in your neighbor, in your community that influenced you, that leaded you to have
Oh,
the
yeah.
interest in soccer? Who was
Yeah. I
that?
mean, both of my parents are incredibly supportive. I mean, when people ask, okay, what's your, how would you be successful, or what's your recommendation? And it's like, pick good parents. So, I mean, my dad saw I liked soccer and literally started a whole league in our town so that I could be able to play soccer. And then, as I got better and better, he was like figuring out, okay, how do we have better competition, and how do you get on better teams? And so I've just, a tremendous amount of support from my parents. And then also definitely some coaches. I had a really great high school coach, but I also had a coach who, there's school soccer, and then there's kind of club soccer where, now it's all professionalized, and there are professional coaches who get paid to coach the kids and help them get better. But when I was playing, there was just this guy who volunteered to coach all the best kids and to help them get better. And so many of the kids from that team then went and played in college, and, he just, because he loved the sport and wanted to help kids, was able to, kind of help people get better at soccer. And then I had really good coach in college who made it so that I could take the step from college to professional soccer. So it's certainly a journey that you can't make on your own. And of course, soccer is a team sport, right? So any kind of success that I had was completely reliant on having a good team. And, I did my part in trying to, make it a good team and but if I don't have good teammates, then I'm not successful and not making it to the next step. So I really, that's one of the most fun things about sports, though, right? It's like the most fun thing are those relationships and working hard and together to try to achieve a common goal.
Wow. And which position did you play?
I tried to score goals.
So
So
like
if
the attacker.
yeah, well, I mean, yeah, sometimes they'd my coach would joke. He said he'd put me at like the defensive midfield, and then I'd like run up and try to score goals. So eventually, he just switched me to offensive midfield. But I played, like, back when I was playing, there was more that kind of number 10 that sat in behind the forwards, and I would do that. That was my favorite position.
Who's your most favorite soccer player?
Oh, when I was playing, I mean, Zidane was kind of my idol, and
Yeah,
I watched and tried to see, okay, can I play like him? I mean, I just loved the way that he was so competitive, but so skilled, and yeah, and also just seemed to kind of win. You know, I like being able to win. But now, I mean, Messi's just the best. I mean, it's just my son loves Messi, and I don't think we'll ever have an athlete who is. I feel like my son is getting an unrealistic perspective of how sports works, right? Because Messi's his favorite player, and he tunes in to watch the World Cup, and the guy wins the World Cup, and then he tunes in. We just had the MLS Championship, which is, and Messi's on Miami, and you know,
yeah, 3-1.
3-1, he gets two
Yeah.
assists, and I'm like, but this isn't how soccer usually works. Usually, your team loses sometimes, and the guy
Uh-huh.
isn't successful every time. But he's just been an amazing role model for the kids and just ambassador for the sport. So
I think having him moving to the US is really inspiring for soccer to grow over there, right? And how did you balance between the practicing time and at the same time you can continue into an engineering major? It's not an easy major for you to balance between the two.
yeah, I mean, I picked a college that would allow me to do that. I mean, I think that that was, you know, they said that you can play sports here and you'll also be, so, you know, practice was set up at a different time from classes, which isn't the case everywhere. But I also think it was just a matter of, um, time management, right? I mean, your soccer's using your body, and so it's not like it wears out your brain, and then the engineering isn't wearing out your body. So it worked to be able to, you know, work really hard at practice, and then go do my studies, and then probably, well, definitely less parties and less socializing, but and less. Um, yeah, those were some of the things that I had to sacrifice, and also just like not watching TV, right? I mean, if you think about how much time people spend like looking at their screens or watching TV, and it's like, all right, if I don't do that, then I'll have time to do these things that I actually like. So yeah,
I think that is the origins of where subtract, the idea of writing subtract came, because you don't have the
maybe.
luxury of time, right? You have to cut
Right,
something,
yeah.
subtract something for something else, right? So, and then another beautiful part is the behavioral science.
Hmm.
How did that get into the picture?
Yeah, I mean, so I when I was majoring in engineering, I just, my parents and other people told me that you need to major in engineering. If you're thinking about doing something with engineering, then you need to major in it. But I never really thought about, okay, how do I want to have an impact on the world until after I was done playing soccer. And then, I mean, I liked the engineering part. I liked the fact that, you're actually doing real things in the world and you're trying to make things better. But the more I learned about kind of different technologies, so many of the problems seem to be less about like having the technology and more about how do you implement it, right?
Mm.
How do we figure out what people really want, what people really need, and how do you like meet those needs? And it's not always a purely technological solution, or maybe it's a different technological solution when you understand that. So I just started to think about behavioral science in that context. And as an engineer, you're not, I mean, I never took a class in psychology, right? And so you're kind of, there's this, people will say, oh, well, you'll just figure that out when you go out into the world, that people, these are soft skills. and then you realize there's a whole science to it, right? There's like a whole science of human behavior and how people think and how people make decisions and how people work in groups. And so that just was really fascinating to me and seemed like, the more I could learn about that and apply the engineering mindset to it, the bigger impact I could have.
I'm just curious to know, when you say that you want to have an impact on the world, that leading to the journey of learning, to help people understand between what they want, the needs, and it's not about technology, it's about people. So back then, what did you think about, changing the world?
I guess my, the way that I think, I basically sustainability, this idea of like kind of environmental and social sustainability. And I think the best definition of that for me anyway is just kind of making it so that future generations have the same opportunities that we have or better. And so that means kind of like keeping the planet as a good positive place to be, and also making sure that, not just environmental sustainability but social sustainability, right? Like making it so that everybody, hopefully everybody, can have an opportunity to meet their own needs. So that's always been, when you ask like, okay, make things better, that's been a guiding focus for me. And of course, I'm also thinking about what skills I bring to it. I mean, I'm a professor at a university, so I'm not, I'm not running a company. My job is to share knowledge and create knowledge. And so that's where I try to, teach students about sustainability, but also learn more things about how we can make a more sustainable world, and then, kind of share that with a lot of people through my books and talking like this. But that's kind of where the make the world better area that I kind of focus on. It's still broad, but it's a little more narrow, I guess.
I'm gonna get you narrower, okay? Because 2.5 months ago, my wife and I, we bought a platform called Sustainability Mind. And so because we would want to share practices about how people, because we believe that if we have the right mindset about sustainability, then maybe, people can start to listening to those sharings, and then they can, implement something in their life, right? And it all starts with, yeah.
Oh, that's beautiful. I mean, sustainability is such a mental thing, right? This is what happens in our head then gets put out into the world. And I think that if we can work on it in our minds, that's a great intervention point. So sorry, I interrupted, but I'd love to hear more about the platform. What does it do?
It's a good interruption. Interrupt more. Okay. So, Leidy, the question for you is, if you define a sustainability mind, so what would that be in your own word?
Oh, that's a good question. You've probably thought more about it than I have. My first reaction is that it would get, I think sometimes we don't necessarily think about what our true goals and values are, right? And so it's, first and foremost, a sustainability mind would say, oh yes, I do want a world in which, everybody can meet their own needs, and I want to make sure that people in the future have the ability to meet their own needs. And then you've got this kind of framework. It's like, okay, this is what, then if you need to make a decision about solar panels or electric vehicles or recycling, you can run it through that filter. But I think that's really important, because when I work with students on sustainability, and these are really like well-meaning students and grown-ups too, where sometimes people have their pet project, right? It's like, I want to clean plastic out of the Pacific, or I want to make sure that there's a composting service in my dormitory. And those things are all great, but I think that if we have to say like, okay, what's the real goal here, and then what's the kind of greatest impact we can have on it, and then you might come up with some different ways to actually make changes. I don't know if that makes sense. And I think the book Subtract I wouldn't say it's the core sustainability mind, but it definitely comes from this question of like, okay, how are we thinking about changing the world? So the idea in Subtract is that when we try to change things, our brains default to, what can I add to make this thing better, right?
Yes.
And there's a bunch of research that we did that shows this. It was published in Nature. It was on the cover of Nature. This is the best academic journal. And then, so this is just the way we think is, okay, you want to change you know, a Lego structure to make it better, we tend to think add, and then we move on and don't even consider this whole other class of options, which is taking away from what's already there. And if you look at a lot of our sustainability issues, which you know, everything from like too much carbon in the atmosphere, too much carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, to, you know, a lot of these things are issues with adding, and some of the solutions that we may not be thinking about or that we might be less likely to implement are like taking away from what's already there. Maybe another example is just if you're thinking about green building, for example, you know, people are like, oh, here's this new fancy like bamboo flooring and it's totally sustainable and you can put it down and it, you know, regenerates every 10 years, so it's okay. But what about like taking away the floor covering in the first place, right? And just having the concrete slab, which isn't good in all cases, but you know, there's some really beautiful like polished concrete floors that are, you know, function and are more sustainable because you've eliminated this whole like kind of material stream. So anyway, I could go on for a long time about sustainability mind. I think I don't think there's a more important area to be working in, quite frankly. And I've got two friends who are working on books in this area. One is Shelley Miller. She's at the University of Michigan. And then the other is Liz Dunn at kind of close to Seattle. She's at I think UBC, University of British Columbia, and both are professors and both have like kind of popular books coming out about, you know, how to think about sustainability.
Beautiful. So at what age did that you know, sustainability starting to, you know, to emerge into your way of thinking and living, Leidy?
My dad's a retired botany professor, so I think, you know, that probably, you know, he was always, you know, showing us things in the woods, right? And so this kind of appreciation for the natural environment. But I also think, you know, to me, sustainability is fundamentally about people, right? It's like, okay, how does this natural environment, how are we able to live and thrive in this natural environment? So I would say it started with that kind of environmental ethos from my parents, but then as I thought about it and read more about it, I like realized how important it is just for human flourishing.
Especially when you have your son also, right? You start to see. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and yeah, you know this, but I mean, once you have kids, you see both, okay, what's their life going to be like? But I think one thing that's really striking for me is seeing how different his life is, because he's got me as a parent who's like been to college and has resources versus a kid who doesn't have those things. And and as much, I mean, the US is pretty good in trying to provide like equal opportunity, but there's no way you can say that that kid has the same opportunity as my son, right? I mean, it's a, you know, it's a social thing that we need to try to keep closing the gap on.
I think the works that you and many other people do is very important, not to only, you know, make that equality happen in the US, but also becoming, you know, a example for other countries, other region also to follow. So thanks for doing that. You mentioned about your father.
So I'd also just say that the U.S. isn't a great example, right? I mean, I think there are good things happening in the U.S., but it's embarrassing that the U.S., you know, doesn't take more of a leadership role on climate and sustainability issues. And I'd just like to say, I mean, I think hopefully your audience knows this, but you know, there are a ton of incredibly smart and thoughtful people in the United States who disagree completely with the way that our, you know, national government is handling these issues.
Yeah, yeah. Wow. And I hope that it could, you know, reverse that, you know, that movement in the near future. And I think that a company with a lot of wise people, smart people, would be able to make some, you know, change back. And I look forward to it. And you
Yeah.
mentioned about your father as a pottery professor. How about your mom?
Yeah. So she was a well, she was a mom. So I have a brother and a sister, and you know, she spent a ton of time on that. But she also worked. She was like one of the first people who, I think, she got the first computer science degree from the University of Connecticut, like first graduate degree. So we had all these like punch cards around our house that we would use for taking notes. And she worked, so she worked in computers, but I mean, she also had, she grew up in like Massachusetts and New Hampshire, did a lot of skiing, like went to college in Vermont, the real like outdoor ethos as well. So I've definitely been influenced by her. She's, the writing, she definitely, has always been editing my essays, right? And maybe subtract is coming from that. She's like, you don't need this sentence, get rid of it. Yeah.
Now we have the better picture
The
of,
origin.
yeah. So
Yeah.
where's the athlete comes from, where the writing comes from, where the engineer comes from, and where the academia also coming from,
Oh
right?
yeah, and my dad like made the soccer opportunities and he had played soccer, but my mom is where I get the competitiveness from. I mean, so yeah.
Hmm. So from the engineering building, like, yeah, schools and bridge, and moving to become an academia, become a professor, lady. So why did you make that move into that permanent career?
I I like being able to being in charge of my own destiny, and being able to constantly kind of explore new things. And a professor is a pretty perfect opportunity for that. I mean, you have to work hard. You can, what I tell people if they're students who are considering it is like, well, you're never going to be able to just turn your brain off on the weekend, right? You can't just, you never like go home from work, but if you like the work, it's amazing, right? And you always have new problems that you can work on, and you have a tremendous amount of flexibility to choose the problems that you're working on, right? So if you don't like something, it's kind of your own fault. You should have studied something else. And I love the opportunity to work with college students. That's been, I think it keeps me not just young, but also keeps me like smart. These people are all, so many of them will be more accomplished. Yeah, I don't know, not accomplished isn't the right word, but so many of these people have such amazing futures, and it's just a privilege to work with them at this stage when I'm 25 years older than them and can actually have a bit of an advantage just based on my life experiences.
I founded the helloNEWNESS platform, and then that comes from a journey 4.5 years ago when I started interviewing experts around the world, right?
Right.
And back then we got a lockdown 1 month in my country, so we started with the idea of, hey, in the lockdown, what can we do so that we can continue in learning and growing, while we can also sharing some positive things for other people. And we thought of having this kind of interview. So we asked a lot of leaders in our country, what do they think about that? And guess what? 100% of them say it's a stupid idea. Nobody gonna listen to it. And so my wife and I sit down and say, hey, if they say no, it's a good opportunity to do it so that we can make an example for other people. And little to what we know, we thought that we are going to do it for 30 days of lockdown. We do it up until today. We interview over 1,200 people in 100 countries, 7 continents. And one of the things that we figured out, that amazing people always have a reservoir really opening for newness in their life, new opportunity, new people, new ideas to explore, even in the old way, old works, that they started finding way to see things new. And for you, you're moving from one thing to the next thing, to the next thing, to the next thing, really open for that newness. So I want to help people to be more confident in the way that we change through having newness in their life, embracing newness. So if you look at your journey and you can give some word of advice for people to explore new things in their life and embrace the newness mindset, what is that you can give to them?
Yeah, I mean, I think what you said is exactly right. For me, I mean, so go back to this soccer example. So here's this thing that, I had this goal since I was 10, right, to be a professional soccer player, and then you kind of achieve it. And then when I was done playing soccer, it was like, it feels good for a week where you can be like, okay, I achieved my goal. But you realize that the fun is not the end, right? The fun is the process and the doing it and the having something that you're working towards. And so I think, I didn't frame it so much as newness as just what's the next thing that you're trying to do, right? And it's not, you're doing it because of maybe you need to get paid, or maybe you need to, you just want to have a sense of accomplishment, but actually that's where the fun is, right? That's where you get this feeling of satisfaction. I mean, in my next book, I talk about how our surroundings meet these basic needs that we have for like agency, competence, and connection, right? And like agency and competence about newness, right? Like, can I affect my world? Can I do things? Can I do things and grow by doing so, right? And it's like that's a never-ending process, right? And you see once that. And it's fun. I mean, I think that the fun maybe is the thing that I keep going back to. It's like sometimes we see it as work, or sometimes we see it as like a struggle, and it's like, no, that if you don't have that, things become very, very boring, and that's where you're getting rid of where the most rewarding things are happening.
Wow. Since you mentioned about the book already, let's jump into that book, because by the time that we launch in this talk, it could help with, like a pre-release of the book also. And congratulations for the first book, being translated to many different languages in different countries. And I hope that it will go to our country soon. And for the second book, what's the difference between, what's the update from the first to the second?
I mean, so the first book is about subtract. So the first book is all about this idea that we default to adding when we try to make things better, and it talks about the contexts, all the different contexts in which that happens, and ways that we can do better. The second book is it's taking on this idea of like kind of an interaction between what's going on in our brains and what's going on in the world around us. But it's like, how does our relationship with our physical surroundings meet our basic needs for agency, competence, and connection? And the idea being that there's all this advice on how do we design your kitchen, or what's the right office workspace, but fundamentally what matters in our relationship with our surroundings is that it's meeting these basic psychological needs that we have, right? And so we should be asking, like, how is this space going to allow me to grow and to show competence? How do I have agency in this space? How is this space going to help me connect with other people and also connect with the physical environment? So it's trying to show that those are the things that we should really be focused on when we're thinking about our physical surroundings. And it's a little bit too, so much of obviously there's all this focus now on, okay, well, like we're looking at our phones all the time, and that's not good. And, I agree with that, but it's like, okay, where should our attention be, right? And we've evolved where our attention is in the world, right? And it's in this like three-dimensional, multi-sensory, ever-changing environment. And hopefully the book plays a small role in like kind of pulling people back into that environment, right? Like this is an amazing relationship we have with our surroundings that, you know, can do things that our phones just fundamentally can't.
So what triggered you to write that book?
That was the book that Subtract I wrote because, you know, I did the research. The In a Good Place, I did the research. It was an important finding, and it was something that needed to be shared with the world. In a Good Place is more like I've been thinking about that for a really long time. I mean, it goes back to the sustainability mindset things that we've talked about, where it's like, okay, what's happening in our brain that is shaping the world around us, and what about the world around us is shaping what's in our brain? And it just has taken a really long time to figure out what's most important for readers to hear about that. I mean, because there's a lot of interesting things there, but some of it is just interesting and not immediately, you know, practical. And I wanted to be able to share what's interesting, but also what's useful. And so I guess it's just been, you know, kind of 10 years of trying to figure out what, you know, how to share that. And of course the writing helps my own thinking, right? You know, so
Right.
but trying to think about how do you want to share this, you come to new ways of how I'm thinking about it. I know I'm kind of being abstract, so I apologize for that. But yeah, that's.
So how did you keep that thinking in the good place for that long without, you know, like so let it nurture and groom in there in that good place and up until
Yeah.
next year to release?
Yeah. I mean, it's the same as soccer, right? Where you've got like I've had a great literary agent who's been supportive all along, and an editor more recently with Little Brown, the publisher, who's helped nurture it. So, I mean, it's always helpful to have smart people saying like, this is a good idea, and like keep working on it. And then, you know, then with the writing has been a really good way to nurture it, right? So I've probably written maybe 500 pages worth of content, and the book's only 200 pages, right? And so, but so you're, yeah. So, but you know, the writing is like honing your own thinking. So, and then the talking about it will do so more. And you're one of the first people that I've talked to about it. And as I figure out what resonates, as I see what kind of lights up people's eyes, then I can I learn more and more about it. So it's not like it's felt like a struggle for 10 years. It's more just like this has been a fun idea to engage with. I also, you know, I get to teach some of the ideas to students and see what lands too. So it all hopefully works together.
I'm curious to know if a place is a good place in your own definition. So what is that place? What does it look like?
Yeah, that's the thing. I mean, so it's really, you can't separate the person from the place, right? So what makes the place good is not necessarily anything about the place. It's about the person's relationship to the place, right? And so again, like, does this place allow you to have agency in it? Do you feel like you can change it? And like, you know, I'm just looking at the room that you're in, right? It's like, you obviously have agency. I mean, the room is pretty set because it's built, but you can put books where you want, you can put plants where you want, you can hang the photos. I mean, there's some great studies about people in nursing homes who are able to rearrange the space have much better life outcomes than people who are put into a space and aren't able to move things around in it. So again, does this space make you feel like you have agency? Can you demonstrate competence through the space? So this is more like the growing, right? Is this space challenging you? And that's kind of a hard one, right? Because so many of our spaces are designed to eliminate variability, right? I mean, if you think about the room that I'm in now, it's like, okay, it's tried to be climate controlled, but you know, when there's variations in sunlight, or where there's that it's more kind of more variability, more challenge than another space. But I'd also think about that more as like moving among the spaces to which you have access, right? So it's like if you want to be in a good place, maybe what you need to do is go to some places that put you slightly out of your comfort zone. Not too far, but you know, just enough to help you grow, right? It's like when you explore, I don't know if you do this, but sometimes I'll like go for a walk and I'll find a place that's maybe a quarter mile from my house, but I've never been there in 10 years. And you're like, oh, here's a new place. And, you know, then you're kind of growing a little bit by, you know, understanding a new environment, or maybe it's a new restaurant or a new cafe. So agency, competence, and then connection is, yes, you know, how does this place let you interact with other people? You talked earlier about inviting me to Vietnam, and you know, obviously, if you can think about your role when you're hosting and when it's your place versus your role when it's somebody else's place, right? And if we can get better at understanding that, so when you're hosting, you're trying to, you know, make people feel welcome, and I'm coming in there and I'm trying to understand all the social cues, right? What's new? How do I relate to these people who have invited me? But then I'm also trying to like understand the new spaces that I'm in. So that's a completely, you know, it's all the same people in the same place, but it's a completely different experience for me than it is for you, because you're comfortable with the space and you're trying to make sure that I'm comfortable with it too. So how does the space connect you with people, but also how do we connect with the places? Because this is our oldest relationship, right? As humans evolved, the most important thing was how do we make our physical surroundings good for us, right? How do we make ourselves out of, you know, make sure that we don't get eaten by predators, make sure that we survive, that we can be out of the elements. And so we've always been trying to like, okay, how do we engage with this world around us so that it's a positive environment for us? And we still have that instinct, right? And so maintaining that connection with our environment, although, you know, now we don't have to figure out how to give ourselves shelter as much, but it's still maintaining that connection is really important to feeling happy and feeling human.
Professor Leidy, if my wife Vivian, she's here, she's in Japan today, but if she's here, she's gonna give you a big hug, okay? Because
Okay.
for years, she's been, and you know, like I've been under a lot of question about why she keep moving, rearranging her workstation in her room, you know, like every 3 weeks or every month or every 3 months, and why I keep my thing, you know, like stable at one station and later on, I realized the importance of moving things around so you can have a new way of looking at the world, looking at your workplace, looking at the different way that you look at me, I look at you, you know. So, and I'm sure that she's gonna give you a bit hurt for that.
What I like about it is the choice too, because I think as long as you're thinking about it, right? So as long as you're thinking, you know what, I could move things around or I could keep them as they are. I want to keep them as they are. Then it's your choice, right? And that's the part that like meets our fundamental need. We need to feel like we have choice in the space. Otherwise, we're in jail, right? I mean, you could can't move things. That's what it feels like. And so even if you're not moving them, just knowing that you have the choice and being able to think about it is really important. But I'll you know, yeah, there's so many kind of interesting angles there when it comes to working, right? It's like, okay, do I want to have my feet up? Do I want to be looking out the window? Do I want to, yeah, all these things.
3 last questions for this conversation. One is, if I ask you to pick a chapter that Professor Leidy wants to share, likes most about the book, and you want to share with our audience in this interview, what would that chapter?
Well, for Subtract, my favorite chapter is probably the 8th chapter. It talks about like subtracting information. There's a famous quote that's attributed to Lao Tzu that's like what is it? To gain knowledge, add things every day. I'm paraphrasing. To gain knowledge, add things every day. To gain wisdom, subtract things every day. And I mean, there's just, that is so hard, right? There's so much information out there, but there's so much benefit to doing it, right? To think about, okay, what are these ideas that have solidified in my head that are actually not true or that I no longer believe in? If we can manage to do that, that's really powerful. So that's chapter 8 in Subtract. I think for In a Good Place, I don't know. There's a fun chapter is chapter 6, which is about it's kind of about home fielded. It's about home and away spaces. So I get to use a lot of sports examples, like, you know, going on the road and trying to win a game is totally different than winning at home, and share some of the funny strategies that coaches will use to try to make it easier to, you know, to go on the road and win. Like, we had a coach when I was in college who we had a road game and it was going to be like a really hostile environment, and so he just like purposely showed up late like 10 minutes before the game and just like threw us on the field to play so that we didn't have time to, you know, kind of feel like we were, and I don't know if that was like the right thing or not, but I think it's interesting to think about the different ways that those dynamics work. And I got to use a lot of sports examples, and yeah, so that was fun.
Beautiful. You mentioned the word "I think" a few times in this conversation. Okay, and my wife and I, we've been on the quest to help people to improve their ability to think, and through conversation like this is one of the best way for us to, you know, extract how other people expand their ability to think. When I look at you, when you think, it looks like there's something in front of you, that engineer mindset, you know, in front of you, and just use your hands to like explain how you think, right? Or organize how you think, right? So the question that we want to ask you, Professor Leidy, is this: how have you been growing your ability to think over the years?
Books. That's just books are a constant companion, and trying to read widely, and also not just read new things, but read, you know, there's a lot of great stuff that's, yeah, kind of been out there for a long time and is still really useful. So books are definitely one. I think, you know, again, the conversations, I could do a better job with. I think what you're doing with the conversations is smarter than what I basically like take the conversations that I get offered, right? But I think being really proactive about them, as you guys are doing, I think is probably a better model, right? If you can put some thought into it and say, this is a person that I'd like to talk to, and have that conversation, that's amazing too. But I also combine that with the books, because to me a book is a conversation with like the best part. A good book is a conversation with the best part of that person, like distilled into a package of that's like covering their whole life. Even if it's not a biography, it's, you know, this is everything. This is their best stuff, right? And so I think those opportunities are priceless.
Thank you very much for sharing that. The last question, and we're gonna travel time the last time in this conversation, okay? And I'm trying to think where I'm gonna bring you to. Let's bring you to one of the game that you lost when you were
lost.
when you were.
Just joking.
You never lost. You just gain experience, right? So
yeah.
So for example, like we bring you to the dining table at the end of one of the games that you finished, put it that way, the soccer game. So your parents,
it can be a loss, yeah.
Okay, put it the last game, okay? And now you and I enter your home, where you back then talk to your parents about the game, the loss, the, you know, and that experience. Then are you gonna tell all of them about the journey ahead of, you know, Leidy? What is that you're gonna tell that little Leidy and your parents?
After lose, I think That's a great question, and this actually it's very applicable, and it's I'm doing A right now for Gretchen Rubin's newsletter, and one of the pieces is one of the questions is if you had advice for your younger self, what would it be? And also another of the questions is like, what's a kind of mantra that you have? And the when I was playing soccer, one of my coaches gave me this poem, and like one of the sentiments in the poem is basically life is a little bit what happens to you, but mostly how you react to it. And that was always, you know, after we lost, first I'd blame the refs and, you know, come up with all these excuses, but then I'd ultimately get to this place of like, okay, we lost. How do you solve that problem, right? How can you make it better? Why did we lose? How can we fix that thing? Maybe it's, you know, hey, our left back didn't have a very good game, but I'm really good friends with the left back. Maybe I can talk to him and get him excited for the next game, right? Or maybe it's something tactical where it's like, you know what, they broke our offsides trap too easily. How do we like stay tighter together as a team and not let that happen? Or maybe it's, I missed my shots, so I'm gonna practice more of those shots. So it's like, what's the reaction to it, right? What did I learn from this? What's the reaction? And of course that's, I mean, for soccer, it's trivial, but that's also just an approach to, this is happening all the time to us in life, right? Things are happening to us that are just bad luck, you know, just the way the world is, and that there's no way to avoid that. But then the question is like, how do you respond? And so I think that's probably a great place to leave it. And that's been, you know, a great lesson for me from sports, but obviously more important in life than just in soccer.
What about the part that you're gonna tell your parents about the future?
About the future, I think it's just, you know, we'll learn from this and move on. Yeah. So what do you mean? Like, tell my parents that
About you and the thing that you're gonna do in the future for your parents.
Oh, for them?
Uh-huh.
I think my thing for them has always been to try to do the same thing that they did for me for my kids, or better, right? It's like they set the bar so high in terms of like just clearly always thinking about how do you make this situation good for your kids and for other kids too, not just their kids, but other kids in the community. And for me, I've never felt like I need to give them anything other than that, which is, and they, you know, they don't even expect that, but I do feel very obligated to put the same positive impact for kids into the world that they did for me and my siblings.
Professor Leidy, thank you so much for being so kind to join our program to share your stories, to write those amazing books, to teach the students to so that they can be confident go into the world and build the world in the way. And it was very important, and I want to say thank you so much for the kindness, the generosity to join and share all this wisdom for us, and send our love, our kiss to your family. And I definitely would love to see you here, and we're coming to the US often, so if we travel to your part, I would love to have all of us have a, you know, coffee or teas or dinner together. Okay.
Yeah, that sounds great. Thanks for having me. This was really fun, and I appreciate your all the work that you're doing. Thank you.
Very much. Say hello to your family for us, please.
I will. Yeah.
Bye bye for now.
Bye. Thank you.